There I was, 30,000 feet above the ground, staring out the airplane window as Seattle disappeared beneath the clouds. My heart was racing with worry and that familiar knot in my stomach that comes when family calls with urgent news. Just 12 hours earlier, my dad had called me with panic in his voice saying, "We really need you home, son. It is about Jessica and the kids." I dropped everything at my marketing job, booked the first flight to Portland, and here I was flying home to what I thought was a family emergency. Little did I know what was really waiting for me. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you will want to see how this family drama unfolds. My taxi pulled into the driveway of my childhood home around 3 in the afternoon, and I could see movement through the front windows. I grabbed my overnight bag, expecting to find everyone gathered around, discussing whatever crisis had brought me rushing back from Seattle. Instead, I walked through the front door to find my dad and my older sister Jessica calmly packing suitcases in the living room. Jessica looked up with a bright smile, as if this was just another casual family visit. There were no tears, no emergency medical equipment, no signs of distress whatsoever. My dad was folding tropical shirts into a large suitcase, while Jessica organized what looked like vacation toiletries into smaller bags. I stood there completely confused, my emergency mindset colliding with this peaceful domestic scene. "Well, son," my dad said without looking up from his packing, "Jessica really needed this vacation, and we could not find anyone to watch Emma and Tyler." The words hit me like a physical blow. This was not an emergency. There was no crisis involving Jessica and the kids. My sister and her husband Brad were simply preparing for their planned vacation to the Bahamas, and I had been summoned home under false pretenses to serve as an unpaid babysitter. Jessica finally made eye contact with me, and I could see a flicker of guilt cross her face, though she tried to maintain her cheerful demeanor. "You are so good with kids, Marion. Please, just this once." Brad emerged from the bedroom carrying a garment bag, looking slightly sheepish, but determined to proceed with their plans. I felt my face flush with a mixture of confusion and rising anger. I had left important projects hanging at work, spent money I had not budgeted for on last-minute airfare, and mentally prepared myself for a family crisis. Instead, I had been manipulated into becoming free childcare. Dad stepped in with his practiced guilt-trip voice, the one he had perfected during my teenage years. "You know how hard Jessica works as a nurse, Marion. Brad has been pulling double shifts at the factory. They have not had a real vacation in 3 years. He paused for effect, then delivered the emotional punch. "Remember when you were struggling after college graduation and could not find work for 6 months? Jessica let you stay in her spare room rent-free and helped you get back on your feet. The memory stung because it was true. Jessica had been there for me during one of the lowest points in my adult life, offering both practical help and emotional support when I needed it most. Dad knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, and he was pressing them with surgical precision. Before I could formulate a proper response, 6-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Tyler came running into the room, their faces lighting up when they saw me. "Uncle Marion! Uncle Marion!" they shouted in unison, wrapping their small arms around my legs. Emma looked up at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of Jessica at that age. "Are you going to stay with us while Mommy and Daddy go on their trip?" My heart melted despite my frustration. These kids had nothing to do with their parents' deception, and they were clearly excited about spending time with their uncle. Jessica seized the moment, quickly pulling out a sheet of paper covered in her neat handwriting. I made simple instructions for everything she said, thrusting the list into my hands. Meal times, bedtime routines, emergency contacts, everything you need to know. "It is really straightforward, Marion. They are such good kids." I looked down at the list then, at the expectant faces surrounding me. Brad was checking his watch, clearly anxious about their departure schedule. Dad was nodding encouragingly, as if this whole situation was perfectly reasonable, and Jessica was looking at me with a mixture of hope and desperation that reminded me of all the times she had helped me in the past. Against my better judgment, and despite feeling manipulated, I found myself nodding slowly. I could not bring myself to ruin their vacation plans, especially with Emma and Tyler standing right there already, assuming I would be staying. "Fine," I said quietly, "but next time, just be honest with me from the beginning." Jessica's relief was palpable as she hugged me tightly. "Thank you so much, Marion. You are the best brother ever. We will be back in 5 days, and I promise the kids will be angels for you." 24 hours later, I was beginning to understand just how naive I had been to think this would be straightforward. Jessica and Brad had caught their evening flight the previous day, leaving me alone with Emma and Tyler in a house that suddenly felt much larger and more challenging than I had anticipated. The first night had been a disaster. Despite Jessica's detailed bedtime routine instructions, Emma had been wide awake until 2 in the morning, claiming she could not sleep without her mommy reading her 3 specific bedtime stories in a particular order. When I tried to substitute different books, she dissolved into tears, which woke up Tyler, who then decided he was hungry and wanted a snack that apparently did not exist in the house. But the real crisis came on the second day during lunch. I had prepared what I thought was a simple meal of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, something I remembered enjoying as a kid. Tyler took one bite and immediately began scratching at his arms and face. Within minutes, red welts were appearing across his skin, and his breathing became slightly labored. Panic set in as I realized Tyler was having an allergic reaction, and there had been absolutely nothing in Jessica's instructions about food allergies. I scooped him up, grabbed Emma, and rushed to the emergency room at Portland General Hospital, my heart pounding with fear and guilt. The emergency room doctor was professional, but clearly concerned as she examined Tyler's rash and checked his breathing. "This is a classic peanut allergy reaction," she explained while administering antihistamine. "Has he been tested for allergies before?" When I admitted that I was just babysitting and had not been informed of any allergies, her expression grew stern. This could have been much more serious if not treated quickly. Peanut allergies can escalate rapidly in children his age. I spent the next 4 hours in the hospital watching Tyler's condition improve, while Emma curled up in a waiting room chair, confused and frightened by the whole experience. The medical bills and prescription costs came out of my own pocket since I did not have access to their insurance information. That evening, I tried repeatedly to reach Jessica on her cell phone, but every call went straight to voicemail. I sent text messages explaining what had happened, but received no response. Growing increasingly frustrated, I called the resort directly, only to be told that guests were not available and that they would pass along a message. It was during this stressful time that I had a conversation with Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who had lived next door to my family for over 20 years. She had come over to check on us after seeing the ambulance earlier. "Oh, honey," she said, "while helping me clean up the lunch dishes, Jessica and Brad have been planning this Bahamas trip since last Christmas. I remember her showing me the resort brochures back in February." She paused, giving me a meaningful look. "She mentioned they were trying to figure out childcare arrangements, but did not want to pay for a professional sitter for a whole week." The words hit me like a physical slap. This had not been a last-minute vacation that required emergency babysitting. This had been a calculated plan that involved deceiving me about the nature of the situation. My suspicions growing, I decided to do some investigating of my own. While Emma and Tyler were napping the next afternoon, I searched through Jessica's home office, looking for any evidence of how long this deception had been planned. What I found was worse than I had imagined. In Jessica's email folder, I discovered a chain of correspondence between her and my dad dating back 6 months. The subject line read, "How to get Marion home without telling him the real reason." The emails detailed their entire strategy. Dad would call me with vague language about family emergency. Jessica would be packed and ready to leave immediately upon my arrival. They had even discussed what to do if I refused or became suspicious. One email from Jessica particularly stung Dad, Marion. He has a savior complex when it comes to family. If we tell him it is an emergency, he will drop everything and come running. But if we are honest and just ask him to babysit for a week, he might say no or ask us to pay for professional childcare instead. My dad's response was equally calculating. I will handle Marion. I know exactly what to say to make him feel like he has no choice but to help. The betrayal cut deeper than I had expected. This was not just about being tricked into babysitting. This was about my own father and sister conspiring to manipulate my emotions and exploit my love for family. They had planned this deception for months, anticipating my reactions and preparing countermeasures. Later that evening, Emma accidentally confirmed my worst suspicions. While I was helping her with a puzzle, she casually mentioned, "Mommy said you would be mad if you knew it was just babysitting, so Grandpa had to make up a story about something being wrong." The innocent honesty of a 6-year-old child had revealed the full extent of their planning. Even Emma had been aware that the adults were lying to me, though she did not understand the implications. I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and processing the depth of the betrayal. These were the people I loved most in the world, and they had collectively decided that my feelings and autonomy were less important than their vacation plans. The third night was when everything truly fell apart. Tyler's fever spiked to 103 degrees around midnight, and Emma woke up screaming from what appeared to be night terrors. I found myself running between their bedrooms trying to bring down Tyler's temperature with cool cloths while comforting Emma, who was too frightened to go back to sleep. I had not slept more than 2 hours per night since arriving, and the physical exhaustion was beginning to affect my judgment and emotional stability. My eyes were burning, my hands were shaking from too much coffee, and I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. The situation became even more complicated when my phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. It was my supervisor from Seattle calling about the marketing campaign I had abandoned mid-project. "Marion, where are you on the Henderson account?" she asked, her voice tight with frustration. "The client presentation is this Friday, and we have not heard from you in 3 days. This is not like you to disappear without proper communication." I tried to explain the family emergency situation, but I could hear the skepticism in her voice. "We need you back in the office tomorrow, or we will have to reassign the account to someone else. This is a career-defining project, Marion, and your absence is being noted by upper management." After hanging up, I realized that my deception-based family obligations were now threatening my professional reputation and financial stability. The irony was bitter. I had been lied to about a family emergency, and now my actual emergency was being questioned by my employer. Desperate for some communication from Jessica and Brad, I continued calling the resort every few hours. Finally, on the 4th day, I managed to reach Jessica directly. Her voice was relaxed and cheerful, clearly enjoying her vacation. "Oh, Marion, you are doing great," she said, and I could hear ocean waves and laughter in the background. "We are having an amazing time here. The weather is perfect, and Brad is finally relaxing for the first time in months. The kids love spending time with you." When I tried to explain Tyler's allergic reaction and the emergency room visit, her response was shockingly casual. "Oh, right. I forgot to mention the peanut allergy. Just give him some Benadryl if it happens again." She paused to say something to Brad, then returned to the phone. "Listen, I have to run. We have a couple's massage appointment in 10 minutes. Thanks again for doing this." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in complete disbelief. Her son had been to the emergency room. I had not slept in days. My career was being jeopardized, and she was worried about missing a spa appointment. That moment of casual dismissal was the final straw. Something inside me shifted from hurt and frustration to cold, calculated anger. If Jessica and Dad thought it was acceptable to manipulate and deceive me, then they needed to learn that actions have consequences. I spent the rest of that afternoon formulating a plan that would teach my family a lesson about respect and honesty. This would not be about revenge or spite. This would be about establishing boundaries and showing them that their behavior was unacceptable. First, I called Mrs. Patterson and asked if she would be willing to watch Emma and Tyler for a few hours the next morning. She agreed immediately, having witnessed the stress I had been under. Then I sat down to write a detailed letter explaining my decision and the reasoning behind it. The letter was 3 pages long, outlining everything from the initial deception to the medical emergency they had failed to warn me about. I explained how their manipulation had affected my job, my health, and my trust in family relationships. Most importantly, I made it clear that I was not abandoning the children irresponsibly, but rather returning the responsibility to the people who should have handled it honestly from the beginning. I booked a flight back to Seattle for early the next morning and began packing my bag. If Dad thought tricking me was acceptable, then he could handle the consequences when Jessica and Brad had to cut their expensive vacation short. As I prepared to leave, I looked in on Emma and Tyler sleeping peacefully in their beds. I felt a pang of guilt about leaving them, but I reminded myself that they would be safe with Mrs. Patterson until their grandparents could take over. This was not about punishing the children. This was about teaching the adults in their lives that deception and manipulation have real consequences. I left the house at 5 in the morning, quietly placing my letter and the house keys on the kitchen counter, where Dad would find them when he came to check on us later that day. The letter was comprehensive and brutally honest about my feelings and my decision. In it, I wrote, "If you thought tricking me into babysitting was acceptable, then you can handle the consequences when Jessica and Brad have to cut their vacation short. I refuse to continue enabling this kind of manipulative behavior, even from family members I love. The children are safe with Mrs. Patterson until you can make other arrangements." As my plane taxied down the runway at Portland International Airport, I called Jessica's cell phone. This time she answered immediately, probably assuming I was calling with another routine update about the kids. "Jessica," I said calmly, "I am currently on a plane back to Seattle. Emma and Tyler are safe with Mrs. Patterson, but you and Brad need to come home immediately." There was a long silence followed by panicked stammering. "What do you mean you are on a plane? You cannot just leave. We are in the middle of our vacation. We paid thousands of dollars for this trip." "Then you should have been honest with me from the beginning," I replied. "You manipulated me into coming home under false pretenses, failed to inform me about Tyler's life-threatening allergies, and dismissed my concerns when your son ended up in the emergency room. I am done being taken advantage of." I could hear Brad's voice in the background growing louder and more agitated as Jessica explained the situation. Within minutes, Brad had taken the phone from her. "Marion, this is completely irresponsible," he shouted. "You cannot just abandon our kids because you are having some kind of tantrum. We trusted you to be mature about this." I remained calm despite his accusations. "I trusted you to be honest about why you needed my help, but instead, you chose to deceive me. The children are safe and cared for. Now, you need to be parents and come home to take care of your own responsibilities." I hung up and turned off my phone for the remainder of the flight. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace and control over my own life. Over the next several hours, my phone accumulated dozens of missed calls and angry text messages. Jessica and Brad were frantically trying to book return flights, which proved difficult and expensive on such short notice. Dad was calling repeatedly, alternating between anger and attempts at negotiation. By the time I landed in Seattle, Jessica and Brad had managed to secure flights home, but they would lose the last 2 days of their expensive vacation. They were furious, but they were also learning that their manipulation had real financial and emotional costs. Mrs. Patterson sent me text updates throughout the day, assuring me that Emma and Tyler were doing well and were not upset by my absence. She had explained to them that Uncle Marion had to go back to work, but that Grandpa would be coming to stay with them soon. A week passed before anyone in my family attempted real communication with me. Dad was the first to reach out asking if he could fly to Seattle to talk in person. Despite my anger, I agreed to meet with him. The conversation took place in a coffee shop near my apartment, and it was one of the most difficult discussions I had ever had with my father. He looked older, somehow tired, and genuinely remorseful. "Son," he began slowly, "I owe you an apology that goes deeper than just saying I am sorry. What we did was wrong on multiple levels, and I have spent this week thinking about why I thought it was acceptable to deceive you." He explained that he had gotten caught up in Jessica's stress about childcare and had convinced himself that a little white lie would solve everyone's problems. He had not considered the impact on my job, my trust, or my sense of autonomy. "I made Jessica's problem into your problem without giving you the choice to say yes or no," honestly, he admitted. "That was manipulation, and it was wrong. I raised you to be honest and trustworthy, and then I failed to show you the same respect." The conversation lasted for 3 hours, covering everything from childhood family dynamics to adult boundary setting. Dad acknowledged that he had always seen me as the family problem solver, the one who would sacrifice his own needs for others, and had taken advantage of that trait. 2 days later, Jessica called. She was crying before she even began speaking, her voice thick with genuine remorse and shame. "Marion, I know what I did was inexcusable," she said. "I put my wants ahead of your needs, and I involved Dad in deceiving you because I was too cowardly to risk you saying no. I have been thinking about this nonstop since we came home, and I realize how selfish and manipulative I was." She explained that losing the last 2 days of their vacation had been financially painful, but more importantly, it had forced her and Brad to confront their own dishonesty and entitlement. They had assumed that family loyalty meant I would accept any imposition without question. "I want to pay you back for the plane ticket and the medical bills and for the time you took off work," she offered. "But more than that, I want to rebuild the trust I damaged. I never want you to question whether I am being honest with you again." The healing process was gradual. I made it clear that I was willing to help family members in genuine emergencies or when asked directly and honestly. However, I would no longer tolerate manipulation or deception, regardless of the underlying intentions. Over the following months, our family relationships slowly improved, but they were built on a new foundation of mutual respect and honest communication. Jessica and Brad learned to ask directly for help when they needed it, and to accept no as a valid answer. Dad began treating me as an autonomous adult rather than a family resource to be deployed at will. The experience taught me that setting boundaries with family members is not selfish or cruel, but rather essential for maintaining healthy relationships. Love should never be used as a weapon to manipulate someone into sacrificing their own well-being. I learned that sometimes the people who love you most are also the ones who need to learn how to respect you most. True family support is built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's autonomy and well-being. Sometimes protecting yourself requires disappointing people you care about, but ultimately, relationships built on deception and manipulation are not sustainable or healthy for anyone involved. The children, Emma and Tyler, were never negatively affected by the adult drama. They continued to have a loving relationship with their uncle, but within the context of honest and respectful family dynamics. Looking back, I realized that my decision to leave was not just about that one incident of deception. It was about establishing a pattern of self-respect that would serve me well in all future relationships, both personal and professional. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to show them that their behavior has consequences, even when it is difficult and uncomfortable for everyone involved. The lesson I carry forward is this: boundaries are not walls built to keep people out, but rather guidelines that help people understand how to love and respect you properly. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who need to learn how to respect you most. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who who were taking advantage of your kindness? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your voice in difficult situations. Share this video with someone who might need to hear about the importance of setting healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own family relationships with greater confidence and self-respect.